Welcome to another episode of Rob Wright's Gen X Pop Culture. And on today's episode, I'm going to give you my top 10 episodes of one of my favorite shows, Quantum Leap. Um, Quantum Leap is a great show. There's a lot of great stuff, a lot of great stories in it. It's just a fantastic show. If you've never seen the original Quantum Leap, I urge you to go get it on Blu-ray or DVD. The DVDs are actually a little bit better than the Blu-ray because the Blu-ray that I have that's a full all 5 seasons doesn't have a lot of the extras in it that the DVDs did. So the DVDs, if you like the extra stuff, are great, but the Blu-rays have a better picture and are great too. They just don't have all the extra special features on it, but definitely get it on physical media. Anyway, let's talk about Quantum Leap. I'll give you a little bit of a summary of Quantum Leap. I'll give you some of my honorable mentions, and then we'll get into my top 10. So it ran from March of 1989 to May of 1993, and it starred Scott Bakula and Dean Stockwell. And basically, the premise is summed up right in the beginning. Theorizing that one could travel within his own lifetime, Dr. Sam Beckett stepped in the Quantum Leap accelerator and vanished. And then he wakes up to find himself trapped in the past, facing mirror images that are not his own, and driven by an unknown force to change history for the better. And his only guide is Al, who's an observer from his own time, who's a hologram that only Sam can hear and see. And basically, he leaps from life to life, hoping to get home. So it's a great show. One of the reasons why it was so great is it had quality acting. Scott Bakula is a fantastic actor, and Dean Stockwell is an amazing actor as well. And those two were amazing in this show. The supporting cast and different people that they would bring in for different stories were fantastic actors as well. So you had a lot of good quality there. I wouldn't be remiss if I didn't talk about the writing of the show. This show was so well written. Yes, there were a couple of cheesy episodes, but there are a couple really heartfelt episodes, and we're going to talk about those episodes tonight. The other great thing about this show was it gave you hope. And unfortunately, in today's world, we don't have as many shows that have that hopeful feeling that you get after watching them. Quantum Leap, you're always hoping that Sam's going to save the day and fix the right that went wrong. And you're also hoping that he'll somehow get home. The other thing that it had, in addition to hope, is it had heart. Quantum Leap is a show that if you feel kind of down and you watch some of these episodes, it'll perk you back up because you see how helping somebody else and how, stories unfold of what Sam does for people just kind of touch you. And once you get into it, it really, really lifts you up. It lifts your spirits. It's a feel-good show. Unfortunately, in my experience with it, I didn't get to see it live. I caught the reruns a couple of years later, right before it went off the air. The problem is that NBC didn't know what to do with Quantum Leap. They originally had it on Friday nights, and they moved it to Sundays. Then I think it briefly on Tuesdays, and then it found a permanent home on Wednesdays for like the final season, and then that was it. So it's hard to get into a show when it's moving around on days and times, and then it would come on later on at night, like the 10 o'clock hour Eastern, the 9 o'clock hour Central time zones, where I kind of grew up in, and it would come on that last show of the evening, and sometimes I couldn't catch it or didn't catch it. So, but I caught it on reruns, and I've watched the whole series, and I fell in love with it. It was great. My brother and I would watch it during the summer when we're home and away from school, and got to just hang out. And it was a lot of fun. It was a great show, and I just really got into it. And I got the DVDs, and I watched all 5 seasons, and I just really love it and I really like it. And since we had a leap year this year, I felt it great. What better way to celebrate that leap year than talk about Quantum Leap? So let's get into this. I'll talk about my honorable mentions first, and then we'll get into my top 10. So here are some of my honorable mentions. As you can probably tell by some of the pictures up here, there's some of the more cheesier episodes. Yes, the show got a little bit cheesy and a little bit hokey, and some of my favorite episodes were actually some of those. There's so many great episodes of Quantum Leap. It's hard to really pick a top 10, let alone pick any honorable mentions. There's so many great episodes. I guarantee if you watch it and you give it a chance for more than a couple of seasons, it'll start to grow on you and you'll have some of your favorites. There's some that may turn you off and that may not be as great, but then when Sam leaps the next one, you're right back into another good episode. So here are some of my honorable mentions, top five. Goodbye, Norma Jean. It's cheesy. It's about Marilyn Monroe. Unfortunately, Sam doesn't save Marilyn Monroe, but he saves her for one last performance. And it's a really decent episode because it shows classic Hollywood. And season 5 was a season where they kind of knew something was up, and so they had to jazz it up with a lot of celebrities and a lot of famous historical figures. And so you had Marilyn Monroe as one of those historical figures. Another episode that I really liked was Future Boy, where Sam lives into a 50s sci-fi show. And it's a great episode with a fun 50s sci-fi show about time travel. Kind of reminds me of Back to the Future with Marty and Doc. It's a lot of fun. It's a great episode. Another personal favorite of mine is Glitter Rock. And that's an interesting one because you really get to see Scott Bakula sing, and he sings some rock songs in it that are kind of catchy, and it's kind of fun, kind of interesting, and it's a very interesting plot story with his son, and it's an interesting ending. Peter Noonan also is a guest star in it from Herman's Hermits, and it's a lot of fun. The next one is A Little Miracle, which is kind of their Scrooge story. Scrooge is one of my favorite Christmas movies, so I always love a Scrooge type story. And you can see the pictures, Al playing a ghost, and just how they kind of Scrooge this guy to kind of cheer up and help out a homeless shelter is fun and is really good. And then my other honorable mention that I would be remiss if I didn't mention this episode is The Boogeyman. And this one is the most bizarre one of all the Quantum Leap episodes. Apparently, this one, there were some TVs all across the country that kind of went out for like 5 minutes during the episode, according to what I read. And this is kind of the horror episode. There's an evil owl that's in it, and Sam, leaps in, and people are dying right and left, and Sam can't stop it, only to find out that Al's the one that he was killing him, and it's not the real Al. And it's just kind of spooky, and it lets you go, what is that evil guy? What is that thing? And it's just really interesting. Also, there's an interesting twist at the end where you meet a famous author. I'll say no more, but check those out. Those are kind of fun, cheesy one. But let's get into my top 10. So number 10 is the series finale, Mirror Image. Basically, Sam leaps as himself into a Pennsylvania coal mining town where he encounters what seems to be another leaper named Stoppa. And basically, Sam's just trying to figure out why he's leaped as himself. He hasn't leaped into somebody else. And he meets this other leaper, and they find out that they've got to rescue these guys from the mine. But the problem is that every time he looks at the miners in the mirror, he's seeing other people that he run into throughout all of his leaping days. And so it's like, oh my goodness, these guys are look like people I know. The other aspect is that Al can't find him. He just knows that it's his birthday. So you've got Ziggy and Al and Gushy trying to find Sam, and they can't zone in on him until the very end. And the bartender that he meets at this bar, his name is Al. And it's interesting, the kind of retrospective about the whole Quantum Leap he talks about with this bartender, and really get some interesting answers about who's really leaping him through time. Anyway, Sam helps save the mine, and the other leaper is able to finally leap out because he helped him accomplish his mission. And Sam finally gets in touch with Al a little bit, and Sam realizes that he can leap. And the part that really tugs at your heartstring is that Sam leaps back into another episode that we may talk about on my top 10. at the end where he sees Beth, who was Al's wife, who didn't know that he was MIA and or knew he was MIA, but didn't know that he was still alive and that he was coming home. And she ended up marrying somebody else. And Sam goes and appears to Beth, and he appears as himself to Beth, and he basically tells her that Al's still alive. And then Sam leaps out, and you find out at the very end, the closing credits, unfortunately, that it was the end of the show, and they basically said that Beth never remarried. She and Al had 4 daughters. It really put right the real wrong in Al's life. And the sad thing is, and it's hard to say this because it just gets you. But Sam never made it back home, and that's how the series ended. And it's number 10 because I hated that. I hated that Sam never returned home. I love what he did for Al, but just the fact that he never returned home, there wasn't more to it. Anyway, the cool thing is that they did some shoots because they didn't know if it was going to continue to a 6th season or it was going to be canceled, so they had to prepare for both. And they have resurfaced, and basically what you get is you get Beth and Al and having a conversation where they can't find Sam, and Beth's consulting Al and saying, hey, I know you're going to find him. And the speculation is that Al would jump into the chamber and leap trying to find Sam, and that's what the direction that it was going to go in the 6th season. So it would have been interesting to keep it. It would have been awesome, but this is my 10th favorite episode, and it's one that tugs at your heartstrings. And then as we get to some of the ones on my list, I'll tell you more about them. And if you know the series, they'll tug at your heartstrings too. So my number 9 is Return of the Evil Leaper. And I love the concept of the Evil Leaper. It's great. There were 3 episodes that were used for the Evil Leaper. And it was basically the Evil Leaper was somebody that was trying to mess things up. That Sam was putting right. Well, they were trying to fix it to put things wrong. So it's the exact opposite of Sam. And when Sam and the Evil Leaper touch each other, they can see who they really are. And it's kind of cool. The first episode with the Evil Leaper was a leap where you go back to a great show called Jimmy, which we may talk about coming up. And he discovers the Evil Leaper as his sister-in-law. The reason why I didn't pick that one was, although it's a good episode, I didn't like the fact that they did it with Jimmy, because Jimmy's such a great episode and such a heartwarming story. And I didn't want to change that aspect of that character and that family and that situation. And I thought that was the wrong way to introduce the Evil Leaper. But I like this episode because Sam leaps into a guy named Arnold, who was kind of your classic comic book hero, kind of your Bruce Wayne, kind of your Superman. He basically was trying to stop a fraternity from doing their initiation, playing chicken with cars. And he did it as the Mad Marauder. And you find out in the episode that part of the reason is because his parents lost their lives. And so that's why he donned the mask as the Mad Marauder, sort of like a Bruce Wayne. And so part of this is Sam discovering the Evil Leaper, trying to stop all this, and then Al trying to talk some sense into Arnold, realizing that he can't go on being the Masked Marauder because he might kill himself one day trying to do this or trying to stop this. So it's very interesting. Very interesting dynamic between Sam and Ilea, who's the Evil Leaper. And it's an interesting dynamic, and it has a continuation episode, which is not as good, but this episode's really good. It's got our Doogie Howser star, who you can see right here, and it's got a couple of other familiar faces that you might have seen from the 90s in this episode. But I thought this episode was really cool. I've got it in my top 10 because I love the idea of the Evil Leaper. I wish they would have introduced it earlier in this series, and not like season 5, which is the final year, because I thought that it really had an interesting dynamic that could have proved to be some episodes that would have really helped the series and made it even more interesting. So check this one out, Return of the Evil Leaper. So my number 8 episode is actually the first episode of Quantum Leap I ever saw. It's Catch a Falling Star. And actually, I happened to watch it right before filming this. So it is actually one of my favorite episodes. Um, you know, Scott Bakula is amazing in this, and he sings several songs from Mana La Mancha. It just shows the range and talent that he has. But in this, he basically has to save an actor from falling and hurting himself and hurting his career. And the subplot of it that's really cool is that he runs into his old piano teacher when he was 15, and he had a massive crush on her. And so he gets a chance to have romantic moment with her because she knew the actor that he leaps into, and actually she was in love with the actor that he leaps into. And so it's really cool to see him rekindle that romance. You see the puppy love of it, which is kind of a feel good story. Kind of the stuff that goes on with this is really, really good. It's just really well written. And, like I said, Scott Bakula performing Mana La Mancha is just fantastic. I mean, he really does sing and he really does dance and perform. He is an actor's actor, and he's just fantastic in it. And Al has some great lines in it too. And I think it's a really good story. It's really solid. It's kind of one of those pick me ups. And at the very end, Sam and Al, you find out that The Impossible Dream is their song, and it was a song that they would listen to while they were building the Quantum Leap project. And if you know that song, it kind of mirrors Sam's quest. And so the feel good about it is, Sam puts things right, and he and Al are going off at the very end, and when he leaps, it's kind of cool. It's kind of fun. Check this one out. It's a really good one. It's kind of it's one of those in season 2 that was just in the middle of the season, but it's just fantastic and it's great. So check that one out as well. Okay, number 7 is probably one of the most award-winning shows of Quantum Leap. It's called The Color of Truth, and Quantum Leap did not steer away from some social issues. One of them particularly being race and racism, and there were several episodes where they dealt with that, but I felt that this one was kind of the most clear and concise one, and it's really good. It's kind of a parallel of Driving Miss Daisy, where Sam leaps into an elderly black man who's the driver for an elderly lady. But the cool thing is the way that they approach the civil rights issue, the way that they look at it, and how they explore the 50s and the racial attitudes then, and how Sam feels about it and how Al feels about it. And, what he does to maybe trying to change minds and hearts. And while Quantum Leap wasn't trying to be, political or go on this rant, they tried to show history and, what could change. And one of the good things about it is that, he really proves himself to this lady and really helps her, and she grows to understand and accept him as an African American person. And towards the end, you find that that she makes a stand, which is fantastic. And it goes towards the civil rights movement that was in the 60s that really needed to happen. And so it's a heartwarming story, and it just tells you, hey, sometimes when you start to judge people by who they are rather than their color of skin, you find out a lot about them. And that's some of the heart of the show. And it showed it how it was back then and kind of the changes that it needed to be. It wasn't about necessarily making a big, huge protest in this episode. It was more about understanding and learning and understanding that we're both humans, that we can coexist, that this segregation and this kind of separation is wrong. And this episode really does illustrate that. And that's why it's so good. And that's why it was award-winning. So definitely check out The Color of Truth. It's a stand-up episode from the first season. Number 6 is another heartwarming episode of Quantum Leap. As I said, they weren't afraid to deal with some social issues. And that's what made this show great. In this episode, Sam leaps into Jimmy in the 1960s. and Jimmy is he's got a developmental disability. They don't explain what it is, just that he's slow, and basically he's there to help Jimmy gain employment. And Jimmy's brother takes him in, and he's got his son Corey with him, and his wife is having a hard time accepting Jimmy in the household. And Jimmy has a hard time. He gets the job, but he's having a hard time, convincing the other guys that he's not a screw up, that he can do this job even with some of his setbacks. And what it really says about the show is that there are all kinds of disabilities that people have. You find out in the show that another guy that was picking on Jimmy actually has a disability too, and that if you give people a chance, you might be surprised what they can do. And what Sam does in this episode is shows that. And it's really good. It's a really solid message. And what he does at the end, saving somebody's life, and really proving himself both to the family, to the employer, to everybody around him, just how great Jimmy can be, despite what people think about his things that most people would see as a handicap. So it's one of those shows that really touches your heart, opens your heart and your mind for people that are struggling or have some of these disabilities. And it's just a warm story. It's one of those stories that you go into it and you see it and you say, oh my gosh, all this hatred of the person. But you see the outside, you see the inside. And Quantum Leap did that. They showed all sides of every issue to tell a great story. So check out Jimmy if you haven't seen it. Okay, so now we're getting my top 5 episodes. And I'll go into a little bit more detail about these 5 episodes. And I mean, honestly, it's hard to really rank them because I think all 5 of these are really solid episodes. But my number 5 one is Shock Theater. And it's one of the most interesting episodes of the series. Scott Bakula is incredible in this episode because what he does is he does several different characters from his past leaps in this one episode. So basically, Sam leaps into a psychiatric hospital at the moment of a crooked orderly who mistreats patients is about to give him an unauthorized electrical shock. And the high voltage wreaks havoc on Sam. And Sam awakens. He begins channeling the other personalities, as I mentioned. So that he leapt into over the past 3 seasons. So including Samantha Stormer, Jesse Tyler, who we mentioned in recently, Herbert Magic Williams, Jimmy, Tom Stratton, and Clarence Kid Cody. And the doctors interpret it as a multiple personality disorder. So it's just crazy. And the thing about it is Al is trying to help him, and Al can't really get through to him. And Sam's mission is to help a patient learn his ABCs so that he can eventually read and be able to function as a normal person in society. And the patient has Down syndrome and can actually see Al, which is one of the interesting things about the show is that Al can't be seen by anybody except for like children and certain people with different who are different in tune mentally. And so it's interesting. So Al has to teach the kid how to read, and he does this rap of ABCs that's really quite funny and quite touching. Anyway, the other thing is that he's having to save Sam and find a way to do that. And the only way to save Sam is to give him another electrical shock, which the doctors don't want to do. And so there's an argument over it. And finally, Sam convinces the nurse to zap him. And she zaps him, and both he and Al leap. And we'll get to another episode that is the continuation of this, and we'll tell you more about it. But this episode is interesting because like I mentioned, Scott Bakula was able to channel all these different personalities and really talk about them and really, play those characters. And he won a Golden Globe Award in 1992 for Best Television Actor in a Drama Series for it. And he was also nominated for an Emmy for Outstanding Lead Actor in a Drama Series. And then also Dean Stockwell was nominated for an Outstanding Supporting Actor in a Drama Series. So this one, it's interesting, just kind of everything that he does in this, because I mean, he's channeling so many different characters, and that's really hard as an actor. And they had all the different mirror images as well in this one. That was really kind of cool to see some of the past sleeps, and then Al trying to help Sam, but also trying to do what Sam was there to do is really interesting, because he's got to get way more involved than he ever thought he would be. So really cool episode. Let's head on to number 4. So my number 4 is one of my personal favorites, A Leap for Lisa. And it's an interesting opening, because Sam leaps into a dream where he's on the beach with a beautiful woman. And he wakes up and finds out it's a dream, and he's a cadet. And it turns out that he leaps into a younger Al, which is very, very interesting. So he leaps into a younger Al, and basically what happened was Al's being charged for murder, and there's kind of a murder mystery to it. And what's happening is that he's suspected of rape and murder of a superior officer's wife, because his car and his cigar was found in the car near where she was murdered. Anyway, basically there's this nurse played by the girl who played Jadzia Dax in it, and her name is Lisa, and she has his alibi. But here's the problem. Unfortunately, she dies in a car wreck and can't provide his alibi. So, Sam's trying to figure out how to save Al. Al's trying to figure out that, but then Al starts to disappear as it kind of wanes, and there's a different Al, and you see the other person that's playing Al on there, and it's a different computer, a totally different type of things, and he's basically got the same mission, but it's a different Al, because the odds are running that he can't save him. And so it's very interesting what happens in there, and it turns out that one of his buddies borrowed the car and gave the older officer's wife a ride home, and she wanted to run on the beach, and he makes a pass at her. She refuses. She trips over a rock and smashes her head, and that's how she dies. And he kind of flees the scene, and Al's taking the brunt of that. And basically, the interesting aspect of this is that as they go through the trial, the older Al has to talk to his younger self, who thinks he's his uncle, in the waiting room. And the solution to this was to send the younger Al through the quantum leap accelerator back in time prior to Sam leaping into Al, to prevent all this from happening, which is kind of cool, kind of interesting. It's fascinating, a real fascinating story, but it also tells you a little bit about Al and his heart and who he really is. He really did have affections for this nurse, Lisa, and for his buddy Chip, and you get to see kind of the more human side of Al and have a real understanding of who he is and what he is and what he brings to the table. And it's just a real great episode. I mean, when Al and Sam kind of switch places in a couple of these shows, you get a real feel for their characters. So it's really cool. Okay, my number 3 episode is the conclusion of the shock theater. So after Sam is shocked and he leaps and Al leaps with him, it's the leap back, which is my 3rd favorite episode. Basically what happens is in June 1945 is where the story takes place. Sam and Al switch places on the lightning strike in the previous episode. So lightning struck right as he was being shocked. So you had all of that, and it caused both of them to leap. And basically what happens is Al became the leaper and Sam became the hologram. So Sam is actually in the imaging chamber. But there's one problem. the computer control switch is the one that opens the chamber door. And in an event of emergency, which is what Ziggy did, it closed him down for several thousand years, thinking that it would be something that they'd have to contain. Well, the only way to contain it would be to use the keypad, which you see above. And so what they had to do is they had to mail it to Sam's lawyer, um, telling him to give it to Gushy 50 years from now so that they could reopen it. And when they reopen it, Sam's finally able to go home as Al's kind of stuck in the body of an army guy who just came back from World War II. And Sam comes back home, and you find out that he was married and is married to Donna, whom he had helped save. He thought she had left him at the altar, but he changed history in season 1, and it turned out that they actually got married and their marriage stuck. So it's an interesting twist. And so Sam's actually able to go home and be at home and actually see her and do all that. And he's trying to figure out a way to help Al. Meanwhile, Al is in this officer, and basically his girlfriend thought that he had died overseas, and he came back, he was liberated, and she was going to marry another guy. And it's basically he's got to save Al because Al's about to be killed by the fiance. So there's like some jealousy and there's a love story and that kind of stuff. And so what ends up happening is Sam, the only way to save Al is to get back into the accelerator and leap again. And so he leaps into the guy that Al was, wakes up and is able to save the day. And Al goes back to the imaging chamber as the hologram. I don't explain that very well, but it's interesting. It's kind of cool. It's good to see Sam actually going back, but it wasn't going to be permanent. So it was interesting to see that interplay and that the way back that you can do it, and him being a hologram and Al being the Leapy was interesting. The reverse roles, and Dean Stockwell does a great job in this episode, and then Scott Bakula is fantastic. The other thing is that they kind of their personalities kind of Swiss cheese a little bit too. So Sam has kind of Al's personality, and you have moments where he's thinking dirty thoughts and he's like, what am I saying? What am I doing? Which is totally out of his character, which makes it a lot of fun and really funny. But it's a fantastic episode, heartwarming episode, and just a lot of fun. So check that one out as well. My number 2 episode is the season finale of season 2. It's a very good episode that tugs at your heartstrings big time. It's called MIA, and Sam leaps into an undercover cop who always has to dress up in different outfits. So when he first leaps in, he's dressed as a prostitute, and he dresses as a guru at one point, and dresses as something else, and it's kind of an interesting episode. Sam's there to actually save his cop buddy, but here's the problem: he's in San Diego, and Al kind of directs him towards somebody else, and it turns out that it was Al's first wife, Beth. And basically, this is when Beth didn't know Al would ever come home, and she falls in love with another man, and basically, marries him. And when Al comes back home, his heart's broken, and that led to Al basically going through several different wives and several different marriages and having different things because his marriage failed because of what happened. Anyway, so Al is trying to convince Sam that he's supposed to meet Beth and stop her from falling in love with this other guy. And it's really interesting because Sam doesn't know what's going on because Al won't tell him that's Beth. And then he finally finds out and realizes that, hey, no, this is not right. We can't do this. We can't change each other's outcome. And, Al's just heartbroken. And Sam saves his partner, which is what he's supposed to do. And right before he leaps. There's a very tender moment, which Dean Stockwell is amazing in this moment. But also, I had read that Dean Stockwell had a very hard time playing this moment because of some of the things that happened in his personal life. And Beth is there, and she listens to Unchained Melody, and Al's as a hologram talking to her. She can't see him, but he mentions some things, and she kind of laughs. And then after playing Unchained Melody, she switches it to their song, which is Georgia on My Mind by Ray Charles, which is a beautiful song. And she starts to dance by herself, and then he kind of starts to dance with her. And you can see the tears on her face, and she's crying. You can see Al's face that he's just heartbroken, but it's like he's given this one moment to kind of be with her. And even though that things aren't going to work out, and it's gut wrenching because you want to be able to save and do something for Al in this moment, but he can't according to those rules. And they leap out, and that's kind of the end. And it's kind of like Al gets the moment, but that's all he gets. So it kind of tugs at your heartstrings. But like I mentioned in Mirror Image, Sam goes back into that moment. And the cool thing is somebody did a 4K video on it. If you look up YouTube and look up, Sam Beckett, Beth, and they splice the two episodes together, this episode with MIA, and then right after that when Sam leaps back and talks to Beth in Mirror Image right after this scene. It's really cool. It's a really cool transition. If you find that on YouTube, I may include it in the description below. Okay, on to my number one. Okay, the number one episode, which is a combination of two episodes because they're part one and part two, is, my favorite episode of the show. It really shows the relationship with Sam and Al and Sam and his family. It's the leap home. And in part one, Sam leaps into his 16-year-old self. And he kind of recognizes that, and he sees that, and he remembers that his brother had died in Vietnam, and his brother was about to ship off to Vietnam. And so his brother comes back home for Thanksgiving and for a visit. And basically what Sam's really there to do is to right a wrong about his basketball team. Apparently because they lost a certain game, and they didn't get scholarships. And so Sam was there to help them win the game. And so his brother kind of comes back to help him on the basketball court and help him out. And he gets to see his mom, his dad, who had passed away from cancer. And he tries to correct his dad from smoking so many cigarettes, but he can't really do that. He gets to see his mom. Has a tender moment with his sister where he shares Imagine by John Lennon with her, tells her about the Beatles breakup, which just kind of upsets her. But also he's trying to save, apparently she was in a bad marriage and he's trying to prevent that and can't do it. And then he's trying to figure out a way to stop his brother from going to Vietnam. And it's really gut-wrenching and heartwarming because he really can't save the ones that he loves, his family. But he gets to spend time with them and gets to see them one more time. He gets to see his brother and his father one more time before they both pass away. And he just gets to spend time with them. And it's a Thanksgiving episode, which is kind of heartwarming and great. And it shows the heart of the show. It shows, who Sam Beckett truly is. And, he basically makes a deal with his brother, and he says, hey, if we win the game tomorrow, you're going to give me one day, April 8th, where you'll crawl in a foxhole and you won't do anything. And that April 8th was the date that his brother Tom was supposed to die. And so he makes the deal with them, and then Sam wins the game. And unfortunately, Al tells him, hey, it didn't work. Sam, your brother still dies in Vietnam. So Sam leaps out of there, and he leaps into Magic in episode 2. So the Leap Home part 2. And Magic is an enlisted man under Tom's command in Vietnam. And so he's in the Navy SEAL unit that his brother Tom is in, and they're on several missions, and they have this photographer, journalist, who's not really supposed to be there with them, but she's trying to win a Pulitzer Prize. Her name's Maggie, and she's basically what she's there to do is to take pictures and report stuff back home. And so Sam's basically there. Apparently, he's supposed to save Maggie and prevent her from getting killed and getting hurt. And, Sam really wants to save his brother. And Al's trying to help him out as best he can. And they have the mission. They go on the mission. And Maggie, they won't let her go on the mission, but she sneaks off and goes off on her own. And she's able to get pictures of POWs. And then Sam is supposed to go out to save the POWs. He's supposed to go and do something else, but Al leads him back to his brother, and he saves his brother in the episode, which is very heartwarming and very, very, very emotional. And they complete the mission, but Maggie trips over a wire and dies, but her photos still remain. And then they weren't able to rescue the POWs. Anyway, they get back, and in the bar, Sam's like, well, I traded one life for another, thinking he failed, but only to find out Al telling him that, hey, she won the Pulitzer Prize. And he's like, what? She won the Pulitzer Prize? Yep, she did, for her last photograph. And he looks at they had the pictures developed, and he looks at the last photograph, and he basically sees Al as a prisoner. And basically it turns out that Al spent another 5 years under, kidnapped or as a prisoner of war in Vietnam. And Al's like, I was always free up here. And basically you find out that, kind of touching, that Al basically risked what would have been his freedom and what would have been a right that once went wrong to save Sam's brother, which shows the dynamic between the two. And it kind of shows everything, and it shows kind of the series, where the series is and what it does. And that's why these episodes are so great with Al and Sam, these last 5 in the Mirror Image, because it really shows their friendship and how they really care about each other and what the heart of the show is about with these characters. Anyway, these are my top 10 episodes. What are your top episodes of Quantum Leap? What are your fun memories of the show? Share them in the comments. Don't forget to like and subscribe, and we'll see you on the next one.